threaded Makarov barrels. These haven't been available for quite some time now, and even the ones that were available were threaded in an odd thread pitch, and if you look at them, they do not look like they're going to support a suppressor very well at all. These, however, are newly made by Zach Chefur at Chefur Customs, and they're threaded in 1/2 by 28. Now, these require special tooling for installation. It's not like a Glock barrel that you can just easily swap out and plug and play. But it's not too bad if you get the right tools to do this yourself at home. Now here's a factory barrel. You can see non-threaded. It's in 9 by 18, same as the new barrel with 1/2 by 28 threads. And I was able to get this out pretty easily with the tool recommended by Chefur Customs. And I'm going to go ahead and kind of explain that process a little bit and hopefully give you some tips to make this a little bit easier if you plan on replacing your Makarov barrel yourself. So first off, you're going to need to completely strip down your Makarov pistol in order to get that barrel removed and have a new one installed. So I'm going to put a link down in the description below to the video that I use to disassemble my Makarov. Now, I'm not talking about just removing the slide. You need to remove all of the internal parts, and it's actually very easy to do. So check out the link down in the description to that video. If you're on YouTube, you'll see it down there. One thing that it doesn't talk about in that video that you do need to remove is your trigger guard. There is a spring underneath this trigger guard that goes straight up, and it actually is pushing up onto the bottom of the barrel just below that feed ramp. So you have to remove that to get this barrel out and the new barrel in. And all you need to do is remove this pin right here. As you're it's pretty easy to push out. Use a punch to put pressure on there and just kind of move this, and you'll be able to pop that out of place. This will come out and you can remove that spring. That's the only thing that's missing from that video that I put down in the description below. Once you get everything stripped down, next you have to punch out the actual barrel pin. I've heard some have had issues getting these removed. Me personally, I didn't have a problem knocking this out. So I just used, my normal punch set, and I was able to punch that barrel pin out no problem. Now, one thing I did notice on the install is, a couple times of this being punched out and punched back in, the one end kind of starts to mushroom out a little bit, so be careful with that. You might even want to reshape it or use a replacement barrel pin when you reinstall the barrel. So these are the instructions that come with the actual barrel here. You can see special jig is required. Do not hammer the barrel in or out. Tells you how to make the hole in the new barrel. So the barrel comes from Chefur with basically a pilot hole. It's not big enough to drive this barrel pin through there, so you're going to have to open it up to 3 millimeters. Now, Lowe's, Home Depot, they're not going to carry 3 millimeter drill bits, so you're going to want to go ahead of time and order a 3 millimeter drill bit so that you can drill that out once it's installed and get that pin back in. Now, this is the tool that is linked on the Chefur Customs product page for the Makarov barrel. This is what they recommend to use for installation. I picked this up off eBay. I believe this is about 50 bucks. And I was able to use this to get that barrel removed and the new barrel installed. But there was a couple things that were a little weird that I'll talk about. So the instructions that came with the barrel installation tool, the press, they're not bad, but they're a little outdated, little archaic, and you're going to notice if you get this that the tool that they're referencing in here is slightly different than the tool you receive. So I was able to use this to do what I needed to do, but you do have to kind of use a little bit of judgment to figure out what it is that they're referencing to in some of this, because the pictures don't necessarily match exactly what you get. Mainly the tool that they use, this here has a threaded block, and a lot of the tool that they talk about there does not have a threaded block, and basically these are just through holes, and there is a bolt that's included that you would put on the other side there. So not a big deal there. And as far as removing the factory barrel, this worked great. It went without a hit. So I'm not quite able to show you how this attaches with all these parts installed, but basically you see that notch there. The factory barrel goes in there. This block is going to go right over there, and you're going to be able to press this barrel out using that tool very simply. It also includes this little steel screw that you just run through here, and all that does is it locks the block into that little hole there on the Makarov. So once you get the barrel off, you're going to put the new barrel in place, and then you use this little steel tube which goes around your barrel, and then you're supposed to run a single bolt through the silver block there, and then you use a mount, one of the included nuts on the other side. Now this tool does not include that nut, so I was a little bit lost in this particular part here. So I tried to run the bolt through, and instead of using the nut, using the threaded block. The problem was that this block was coming into contact with the feed ramp on the barrel. It wasn't making good contact with the actual face of that chamber there. So it was marring this mount a good bit. So I didn't really feel comfortable installing it that way. So what I ended up doing is I kind of flipped this whole thing around so that I was using this block to make contact up here, and then I pulled it forward that way. Now, if you want to install it how they recommend in the instructions, then you're just going to need to get this this nut that's going to fit these threads, and that'll probably work a lot better. I didn't happen to have that nut, so I kind of just made this work, and it did work, but the bolt going through the barrel will be a lot more centered, and it'll put less pressure on this tool, because I noticed as I was pressing that new barrel on, these bolts were kind of flexing a little bit, so you had to be really careful with that, but it worked. I'd recommend getting a nut so that you could run a bolt straight down the barrel and get it pressed on that way. So once I had it installed, I noticed that hole that was in the barrel from the factory needed to be opened up to 3 millimeters. The instructions call for a number 31 drill bit. These instructions that came with the tool. Now that number 31 drill bit is like 3.02 millimeters or so. So it's slightly larger than the 3 millimeters recommended by Chefur. So I went with the 3 millimeters, and I measured the hole in my Makarov with some calipers, and that also came out to 3 millimeters. So I got a 3 millimeter bit, threw it on my drill press, ran it through, and I was able to punch that barrel pin in pretty easily. So no issues there. The instructions from Chefur, they do mention to follow this ramp flush with the frame, but you can see on mine that wasn't required. It was all pretty flush from the factory, so I didn't have to do anything there. But if yours is protruding, you will have to follow that portion flat. Now here's the Makarov with my silencer coat Omega 9K in place. Works great, but this is not actually going to work. And the reason is because this barrel does not have a shoulder behind the threads, meaning that a standard shoulder mount will not allow your suppressor to mount properly. You can see there the shoulder doesn't really extend any further than the thread. So if you try to use a standard shoulder mount and screw it down, what's going to happen is it's just going to kind of keep going, and then you're either going to damage the barrel itself or the threads on your suppressor by trying to force it on there. So you need a face mount suppressor mount. A face mount suppressor mount mounts against the muzzle face. Now you can see this is completely unloaded, but the muzzle face is obviously right here. So it has to index flat on that muzzle face in order to index properly. Now, this so far has been probably the most challenging part of this whole project, is getting the correct suppressor mount for my Omega 9K. I have several different suppressors, and none of them I've been able to get to mount properly. So I did some digging around the internet, looking up face mount adapters, and the only one I can find is by Silencer Co., which the Omega 9K would be the perfect candidate for. JMac does make some face mount devices, but they're only available with the hub standard threads. So unless you have a 9mm suppressor that can use those 1.375 by 24 threads, you're going to have to look a little further. So I did some digging around, and I found on the Silencer Co. site they have the AC1756. That is their 1/2 by 28 face mount adapter piston for any of their pistol caliber suppressors. So this is designed specifically for barrels like this that don't have a shoulder for it to index on. So I have that on order. I don't have it yet, but theoretically that's going to be the mount that I'm going to need to make this work. So once I have that, I'll be taking this out to the range, getting some footage of me shooting it with the suppressor attached, and I can't wait for that. The threaded barrels for the Makarov haven't been available in quite some time. If you go on the Chefur site, it says on there it's been over a decade since these are available. So really cool to have the ability to shoot the Makarov suppressed, because anything worth shooting is worth shooting suppressed. So there it is, installed in all its glory. The Chefur Customs 1/2 by 28 threaded barrel on the Bulgarian Makarov. Let me know what you think about that down in the comments below, and thanks for watching.